It's been a few days since I made a video. The last one was the happy birthday to an aspiring poet. Um, Another thing that I was asked about was whether I could do something else about Jekyll and Hyde. Well, I haven't got any other poems about Jekyll and Hyde. I only made that original poem to go with a play that I wrote for Kids Gallery. It got censored a bit actually because I wanted to make the play like a shorter version of the original novella, um, and to have this famous scene where the point of view character, Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, has to go into a morgue and identify the body of somebody who's been murdered by Mr. Hyde, which is a good scary scene, but it was considered too gruesome. In fact, it was toned down. The play had to be toned down until we didn't mention a murder happening at all, which kind of spoils the story. You know, the whole thing is Dr. Jekyll doesn't ever dare to become Mr. Hyde again because Hyde's done something so terrible that he could hang for it. If Hyde can't commit a murder, that kind of doesn't work. But they were always trying to make the plays less gruesome for children. I remember when I did for the younger kids, the Three Little Pigs, they wanted the story to be the modern bland version where the wolf blows down the straw house, so the first little pig runs to the stick house, the wolf blows down the stick house, and the first two little pigs both get away and run to the brick house. I preferred the old-fashioned version where the first pig gets eaten, then the second pig gets eaten. It's only the one in the brick house who survives. And so I had the child playing the part of the wolf jump on the other one going, ha, 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 and the one being eaten, squee, 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 squee. It was a lot of fun. The kids laughed, the parents laughed. We knew it was only make-believe. I don't think anyone was scarred by it. But they make you be very careful these days, and I wasn't allowed to include a murder in Jekyll and Hyde. Of course, nowadays everyone knows the story of Jekyll and Hyde. We all know that it's about having a split life and having two sides to a personality and things like that. There are pubs up and down the country. There used to be one near me in Reading called the Jekyll and Hyde, which have pub signs with two different faces on. You know, there was an episode called Strange Case in the horror series Lovecraft County where a black woman is able to change into a white woman, which allows her to lead a very different life in 1950s America, as you can probably imagine. But of course, in the original story, it was supposed to be a twist. You weren't supposed to realize that these were two sides of the same man. You were supposed to be following the adventures of this lawyer who was wondering why his friend, the terribly respectable Dr. Jekyll, was now friends with this horrible, creepy little man called Hyde, who was allowed to come and go at his house at any time he wanted to, as though he had some kind of hold over Dr. Jekyll and maybe was blackmailing him or something. The fact that they were the same person comes as a big shock. Most movie versions don't do it that way. They show right from the very start that Jekyll and Hyde are the same person. They show from the very first time Jekyll drinks the medicine, they have a big, face pulling and transforming and changing into Mr. Hyde. Yeah. But in the original book, it comes as a shock. What happens is, I'll now read a shortened version of the scene. It's all in 19th century English and a bit long-winded. I'll summarize. But Dr. Lanyon, Jekyll's old friend, has been told in a letter written in Jekyll's handwriting, go to my house, collect a drawer from one of my cupboards, bring it back to your house, stay there until midnight. Somebody will come from me to collect this drawer. Lanyon thinks Jekyll must be going mad, but he does as he's asked. He brings the drawer and waits until midnight with a gun at the ready in case things get too dangerous, in case there's something really wrong going. Now, this is the scene that happens, and it's a very famous scene. A version of it is worked into almost every movie or play of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. 12 o'clock had scarce rung out over London ere the knocker sounded very gently on the door. I went myself to the summons, and found a small man crouched against the pillars of the portico. Are you come from Dr. Jekyll? I asked. He told me yes, with a constrained gesture. When I bid him to enter, he did not obey me without a searching backward glance. A policeman was approaching with a bullseye lantern, and I noticed that my visitor flinched at the sight and hurried inside. The little man gives a very strange, creepy sensation to Dr. Lanyon. His pulse seems to change when he's close to this man. The person who I'd from the first moment struck with a kind of disgustful curiosity was dressed in a fashion that would have made an ordinary person laughable. His clothes, although they were rich and sober fabric, were enormously too large for him in every measurement. The trousers were hanging on his legs and rolled up to keep them off the ground. The waist of his coat was below his haunches. The collar was sprawling wide across his shoulders. Now, strange to relate, his ridiculous clothing was far from making me laugh. Rather, there was something abnormal and misbegotten about the whole essence of the man, and something seizing and surprising, and so this extra strangeness of his clothes just seemed to fit in with this general weirdness of the figure, and to make him even more sinister. These observations took me only a moment, and he cried to her excitedly, "Have you got it? Have you got it?" And he tried to grab hold of my arm and shake me. I put him back, conscious of the touch and a certain icy pang along my blood. "Come, sir," I said, "you forget that I have not yet the pleasure of your acquaintance. Be seated, please." And I gave him the example, seating myself as neatly as I could in my ordinary chair and trying to seem as much like my normal way as I could manage. "I beg your pardon, Dr. Lanyon," he replied civilly enough. "What you say is very well founded. My impatience has shown its heels to my politeness. I come here at the insistence of your colleague, Dr. Henry Jekyll, on a piece of business of some moment. I understood." He paused and put a hand to his throat. I could see that in spite of his collected manner, that he was wrestling with the approaches of hysteria. "I understood a drawer." I took pity on my visitor's suspense, and some perhaps on my own curiosity. "There it is, sir," I said, pointing to the drawer, where it lay on the floor behind a table, still covered with a sheet. He sprang to it, then paused and laid his hand upon his heart. I could hear his teeth grate with the convulsive action of his jaws. His face was so ghastly to see that I became alarmed for both his life and reason. "Compose yourself," I said. He turned a dreadful smile upon me. And then, with a decision of despair, he plucked away the sheet. At the sight of the contents, which were medicines and powders from Jekyll's laboratory, he gave a great sob of relief, so that I sat petrified. The next moment, in a voice that was already fairly well under control, he said, "Have you a graduated glass?" I rose from my place with something of an effort and gave him what he asked. He thanked me with a smiling nod, measured out a few minims of the red liquid, and then put in the powders. As the powders began to dissolve, the reddish liquid began to fizz and bubble, and then it turned into a dark purple, which faded again more slowly to a watery green. The visitor, who'd watched these metamorphoses with a keen eye, smiled, set down the glass upon the table, turned and looked at me with an air of scrutiny. "Now," I said, "to settle what remains, will you be wise? Will you be guided? Will you suffer me to take this glass away with me and go forth from this house without further parley? Or has the greed for curiosity too much command of you? Think before you answer, for it shall be done as you decide. As you decide, you shall be left none the wiser. No more, neither richer nor wiser than now. Or, if you shall so prefer to choose, a new province of knowledge and new avenues of fame and power shall be laid open to you here in this room upon the instant. But your sight shall be blasted by the prodigy that would stagger the unbelief of Satan." "Sir," I said, affecting coolness, "you have speak in riddles. You will perhaps not be surprised to hear that I don't entirely relieve you. However, I've gone too far to back down now." "Very well," replied my visitor. "Lanyon, You remember that what follows is under the seal of our profession. Now you, who have so long been bound by the most narrow and material views, you who have derided the virtue of transcendental medicine, you who have derided your superiors, behold! He drained the glass at a draught, and he reeled and staggered. He gasped. He clutched at the table and held on, staring with injected eyes, gasping with open mouth. And then I thought a change came upon him. He seemed to swell. His face became black, and the features seemed to melt. And the next moment I had sprung back to my feet and was back against the wall, my arm held out to defend myself against the terror. "Oh, God!" I cried. "Oh, God!" again and again. For there, before my eyes, pale and shaken, clutching half fainting and groping before him with his hands like a man restored from death, stood Henry Jekyll. What he told me in the next hour I can not set down on paper. What I saw and I heard from my soul sickens from it. But I will tell you that the creature who crept into my house that night is known as Hyde, and is sought in every corner of the land for the murder of Carew. It's a very famous scene, and it worked into almost every version because it's a chance to do such great dramatic overacting. I'll maybe set some links to other versions, to movie versions of it. Anyway, that's all for now. Bye.